Hello everyone, thank you for joining us at the Future Napier Committee. I will start with apologies which I have from Councillor Crown, Mayor Wise and a note of early departure at 11 from Councillor Taylor. Do I have a mover for those? Moved by Councillor Tariha, seconded by Councillor Bogue. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Call for any conflicts of interest? There being none. I'd just like to take the opportunity, as we did with the Sustainable Napier Committee, to welcome Coralie Thompson to our Future Napier Committee. Welcome to your first committee. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora koutou. I'm Coralie. I'm born and raised in Napier with my grandparents. I whakapapa Tāngwell. I'm a trustee for Maunga Hararu Tangitu Trust. I've been on the trust for 2 years. It's my first experience in governance. I also have a position as a trustee on the IMPB board, which is the iwi partnership, IMPB, iwi Māori Partnership Board, which is under the Te Aka Whaiora Māori Health Authority. I have a background in working in health. And I'm very passionate about working with our community. I'm very nervous about being in this space, representing our hapu, and I really hope that perhaps I can bring maybe my strengths in connecting with the community and connecting with hapu to ensure that they are involved in processes and have a voice. So. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Kia ora. Thank you. We are really honoured to have you, and we look forward to you getting your feet under the table, feeling more comfortable, and getting to know us all as we work through this interesting space that is governance. So welcome. I'll move on. We did have a public forum, and just to note for the minutes that our presenter is unwell, so we're going to push that presentation out to our next Future Napier Committee, and we wish them all the best with their recovery. No announcements by myself. Any announcements by management? And I'm looking up at the board. I think Louise is still with us, just checking in. I don't think any there.
No.
Thank you, Louise. A call for any minor matters which are not on the agenda. There being none. Can I ask for a mover of our confirmation of minutes from the 18th of May as a true and correct record? Moved from Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Bogue. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carried. So thank you. I'll move on to our first agenda item, which is a first for our committee, which is a key projects update. And I'll pass over to Rachel to introduce this item for us. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. So following on from the Sustainable Napier example, we thought it quite useful to bring some updates of some of the key projects that are happening in the City Strategy Directorate to you, because there is some pretty amazing work happening in there, and be interested in your thoughts on the usefulness of this update to you and the frequency in which you would like to see it, if you would like to continue to see it. So I have a great lineup here of amazing people to sort of present on these things. And what I thought we might do is go through each project, if you like, and then the officer will just give you a brief overview and then ask any questions of that project, and then we can move on to the next one. Does that sound okay? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Darren, to start with.
Morena koutou. So I'm going to talk about the Civic Precinct project. It's probably a little while since you've heard from me on this particular big bit of work, and I'm going to stop calling it a project. I'm going to call it a programme of work, because it has lots and lots of facets of projects going in underneath it that are really important for that civic development. So we are now fully in concept development stage. We now have our architects, our Mana Whenua design lead, which is a first for us. So that is around co-design. We have our QS and we have our project management team, plus multiple other services underneath that who support that design team in delivering the concept stage. So our concept design stage is essentially a 12-week sprint. So we have a 4 Wananga process, and we had the privilege and honour to have the first one, or Wananga Zero as we called it, at Whairangi Marae on Tuesday, which our acting mayor, Councillor Crystal and Councillor Taiha were in attendance of. And I believe that was a really strong beginning again, that we were very much going through the process today. I know how much recaps can feel like we're not going forward, but we also talked very much in detail about the expertise that our Mana Whenua design lead, Israel Birch, will bring to this kaupapa as we go through this process. As elected members, you will join us in Wananga Free, which is our 4th workshop on the 17th of August, when you'll start to see drawings on the page. You'll start to see our council chambers, our libraries, community rooms, and our council customer services start to form itself on that site on the corner of Station and Hastings Street. Also, we'll start to look at the public realm. It is a very big bit of public realm space that is really vital for the connections and connectivity of our city, and looking at our neighbours as well, and all the developments and changes that have been happening in that space over the last year or so. So we need to be creating an enabling environment for our neighbours, as well as taking a really strong leadership approach in what we do. The other part of this programme of work is around officer accommodation. So where do we want to live? How do we bring us back from our administration staff over 3 buildings at the moment into one place? So as elected members, you will be at a workshop on the 13th of August going through the outcomes of that business case and working through what the implementation plan would be for that business case. The implementation is relatively complex and has some challenges around it, because we're talking about a multi-million-dollar development potentially. So we need to work that through with you before we bring it back as a decision piece. For the concept design, so 17th of August workshop, then we'll bring it back to this committee in September, and then on for a final decision to go into the next gateway on the 12th of October, which moves us into preliminary design. And then we move on to developed and detailed design. Detailed design is when we start looking at consenting. So resource building consents, that's when we need to be really sure around costing, the opportunity, because we'll be going through an extensive procurement process for our lead contractors for the building of this. The procurement around contracting building supplies of this nature, building companies, will take 3 to 4 months minimum. So we need to be starting that early next year once we are sure around our concept development. So, I mean, that's a very brief run through. If either our acting mayor or the 2 councillors who were at the one on Tuesday, it'd be quite good to get your input or feedback, how you felt that went. And I think it was a really strong start to what I think is a really powerful kaupapa.
Thank you, Darren. And while you have the mic, did you want to touch on the tender situation as well for those 2 contracts?
There's essentially 4. We have gone through the procurement process that we now have selected our preferred suppliers, and they are working with us. We're just working through the detail of some of the contractual details because the programme has changed from when we originally went out for procurement.
So you're confident that's on track?
I am now confident it is on track, yeah.
Thank you. I will invite Councillor Crystal and Councillor Tariha if you wanted to share any thoughts from our wānanga that we have had this week out at Whararangi.
I'm happy to go first. First of all, it was a privilege to be out at Whararangi. I'd never been there before, so it's beautiful what they've done there, and learn about their the history of how they put it together. So that was really cool. And, the big thing I think for this library, as we've said at the thing, we call it a library, but it's way more than a library. It is a community space where everyone is welcome, and that's one of the biggest things we were trying to do, is make, no matter who you are, what your background is, that you feel comfortable coming into the space and feel welcome coming into the space. It will have books and it will have archives and things, because that's important, but it also will have great community spaces, places for our youth, places to study, and sort of working spaces, so that we can have some really cool workshops, and people can go in community spaces where they can go and teach and learn and things like that. So basically the ideas have all kind of come together, and now hopefully the architects have listened and going away to come up with what it is. I guess one thing that I said, of course, is that, budget is really important because we have been smashed here with the cyclone, so we really wanted to put that out there that, they need to be very cognizant of our budget and what we've got to spend, because we would hate them to come back with something that's twice as much as we can afford and go, oh, that's wonderful, but we can't afford that. So that was something that I said, hopefully quite strongly, but yeah.
I think it was heard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Tariha.
Kia ora. Yeah, just adding on to that kōrero. Thank you for the update for our councillors. I really enjoyed the day and learnt a lot. And although I was only there for 3 or so hours and turned up a little late, yeah, really enjoyed the day, and it was well organised, and everything from the manaakitanga, from the marae and the whakawhanaungatanga with everyone in the room, and all the experts flying in from everywhere, from Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and yeah, it was the only sunny day we've had in a while, and I just think the day was really good. Kia ora.
Yeah.
Look forward to the next one.
Kia ora. Thank you, councillors and Darren, for presenting this update to council. My summary of our day on Marae was that it was fabulous to get everyone back on track. We know that we have had a difficult start to this year, and so the momentum, I think, is now back in this project, which is really important. And before I open up for questions, I will also just leave us with a little teaser as elected members that the conversation around the name of this beautiful place that we will be creating together is progressing, and that's something that we're looking forward to bringing to you in good time with Morahu. So thank you for that, and I'll open up for any questions on the project for Darren. If everyone is comfortable, I'll pass back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Darren. So we're going to ask Paulina now to give you an update on the Ahuriri Regional Park, the proposed district plan and the future development strategy. I'm sure she'll take questions at the end of each one of those. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Kia ora, good morning, everyone. I'll start with the regional park. I mean, you're very familiar with that project. The regional park stems from the Ahuriri Estuary and Master Plan and Coastal Edge Master Plan we did in 2018, with the main objective to improve water quality in our natural asset in Napier, which is the estuary. The regional park seeks to improve water quality, treat stormwater from the city. The majority of the stormwater from the city ends up in the estuary, and the Ahuriri Regional Park would provide that venue for the water to get cleaned up through wetlands, etc. There is a multiple layers of outcomes that we're seeking from the regional park. The first one obviously is improvement of water quality, but there's also biodiversity, improving ecosystems. We know that there is a wildlife sanctuary there with birds, so that would serve the enhancement of the habitat of those species as well. We're looking at working together with Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Mana Ahuriri Trust to the potential for having some educational facilities and providing for recreation for the community as well. So it's multiple objectives that this project seeks. In terms of what has happened last year, there was a joint committee established, which in partnered with the Regional Council and Mana Ahuriri Trust, and they have approved now a project management role for that, which is a consultancy firm strategy. They are going to be leading the project plan, the project management for this project. And the next steps in this project is to secure the procurement for the master planning team, which is going to work in collaboration with key stakeholders, to understand the aspirations and and what the community wants for these projects, and together with the Manahuriri to understand the cultural aspiration as well, before we develop the scope for the project. So that is the next step. Are there any questions about that?
Yes, I have.
Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, Paulina. I just wondered about Te Komiti, Murawai or Te Whanga. How is that composed? Who's in that?
Yeah, that needs to be established, the committee of the Whanga, and then work together with, it's going to be very much fitting into that, the Ahuriri Regional Park process as well.
Because it did used to be in existence, didn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And now that the Manahuriri settlement has passed, then we would re-establish the committee.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a little bit more information on that as well, Councillor Bogue. So Te Committee has been formed and we haven't had a formal meeting yet. It's chaired by Tanya Eden, and you'll note we have members to that as well, being, I think that's myself and Mayor Wise. I think Councillor Tariha, do you sit on it from the Manahuriri side?
No,
No.
I'm allowed to.
Yeah, you've been in as sort of an alternate.
Yeah.
So basically, Te Committee's mandate is to create a catchment-wide management policy, which will find its place in the legislative framework as well. And there's some discussion around how that will work. But this project is focused purely on this 284 odd hectares of council-owned land that we will work in partnership to achieve those outcomes Paulina was talking about. So, and that piece of land does sit within the catchment, if that helps sort of put it in perspective.
Yeah, and the committee would set up the vision for the Ahuriri estuary. That's really the key mandate of that.
Yeah, and the Te Committee o Murawai Te Whanga is the committee that will look at the whole whanga, so it's before the earthquake. So if you imagine the scope of that is a lot broader than just the Ahuriri Regional Park. So the Ahuriri Regional Park Joint Committee will be focused on that, and then the Te Committee Te Murawai Te Whanga will be across the whole area, all the waterways.
Thank you. If there's no other questions on the regional park, Rachel.
Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, no, Paulina's going to carry on.
Paulina's gonna
Yes,
carry
with
on.
district plan now. Yeah.
Yeah, so the district plan, I guess, is another long-term project. It's been 6 years on the making. We have gone through a draft district plan, and now it's getting ready to notify the proposed district plan. We're very close to doing that with the aim of notification in September, end of September. So we really focus now on the comms and engagement plan for that piece of work. If you think about district plan, I believe it's one of the key projects of the council. It sets up land use and subdivision, how you manage subdivision and land use across the city. And I must say that everybody is touched or affected by the district plan in many ways. So if your interest is in ecology, your district plan protects your significant natural areas, protects your landscape. If you're interested in culture and heritage, we're looking at sites of significance to Maori and how we protect our heritage, built heritage and natural heritage in the district. If you are a developer and want to looking for areas to invest, the district plan set up the zoning of where businesses can go and thrive, etc. If you're looking at resilience, the district plan will look at connectivity, natural hazards, all of that as well. So it basically touches everyone and all ages, a group of ages within our community. It's a major program of work, and I'm very pleased that we're so close now to notify that and put it out to the community. The proposed district plan, once it's notified, it goes through a process that takes around 2 years to get to final decisions, and that goes through submission, further submissions, and hearings as well. The good news about this new plan, there's quite a few new things that we have implemented in the proposed district plan. The first very important one is all the national policy direction that we have received from government over the last few years. So that is the national policy statement for urban development, which would make sure that we have enough capacity for residential and industrial and commercial growth in the future. We have implemented the NPS for highly productive land, which seeks to really secure productive land across New Zealand for the future, so we don't keep on sprawling as a city and really look after those fertile soils. And despite that it's not, the NPS hasn't been released yet, but there have been a draft release. We're looking at the NPS for biodiversity, indigenous ecosystem as well. So we have included, as I said, significant natural areas in Napier, and we are protecting that within the district plan. Another key consideration is related to climate change and how we consider that within the district plan, not from the point of view from resilience, but also from other aspects of mitigation and etc., like reducing vehicle kilometers traveled by intensifying residential development in areas where it's close to commercial nodes and services, so people don't have to travel far to get to their places of work or entertainment, etc. So there's a lot of layers of benefit that this new plan is going to bring, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing it implemented in the city. Are there any questions about the district plan?
Councillor Bogue.
Thank you. I noticed that public notification is due at the end of September, open for submissions till mid-December, but the first hearings won't be until towards the end of next year. Is that because of the LTP or?
No, it's really the process that it takes, because after you have your submissions, the council needs to summarize the submission and provide them available for the public to have a second round of submission. We call it the further submission process, where you get again more feedback for another certain period of time, and only after that your officers will produce a hearing report, which has to be notified and provided before the hearings as well. So it is all those stages of the steps in the process that make it really, it seems like it's a long time.
2 rounds of submissions.
Yeah. And that is stipulated under the RMA Schedule 1. You have to do those 2 rounds of consultation. It's very process-driven, that part of the legal notification of the proposed district plan. It's a very structured process.
Very important document. Thank you.
All right. If we have no further questions on the district plan, we've got the future development strategy.
Excellent. So the future development strategy is a requirement under the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. It is the main objective of the future development strategy is to provide for a 30-year plan for growth for Hawke's Bay. We work collaboratively with the Hastings District Council and the Regional Council in developing this strategy. And there's it's a complex process, but you would be probably very familiar with it. It's similar to what we did for the Napier spatial picture document. When we release, you engage with stakeholders, engage with landowners, find opportunities for growth. Then you look at all your opportunities and constraints, like, for example, hazards, etc. And then you come up with the best, you analyze all that information and you come up with the best case scenario for growth and affordability as well, because consider the provision of infrastructure, consider resilience, so natural hazards, consider all the other layers that I said about heritage, significant landscape, etc. So we're working together, as I said, with Hastings, and the plan is to have a final FDS, what we call it FDS, by near October in 2024. The FDS and the infrastructure needed for that growth, to cater for that growth, would be included in your long-term plan as well. So it's a very important document. And this is the replacement of HPAT, what you would be familiar with, called HPAT, which we have had for a few years already.
All right, thank you, Paulina. Are there any questions on the future development strategy? Thank you, very well summarised, Paulina.
Thanks, Belinda. That's fantastic. So, you've met Juriel before. Juriel's going to take you through our bylaw and policy review program.
Thank you. Kia ora, everyone. Nice to see you all. So I'll just give you as you would have read, it's a pretty short update in terms of the bylaw and policy review program. But just some key points. We just, you would have known, we just made some minor amendments to the dog control policy, bylaw, and those were just based on some administrative errors. So that's something that's just happened. In terms of something that is undergoing at the moment is the Easter trading policy review. And a key focus in that is we have come up to the time for our first review since 2018, and our key focus is going to be community engagement and comms this time, and that will be what I'll bring to you in a workshop very soon. In terms of what's upcoming, we've got the gambling venues policy to be renewed and the mobile signs bylaw also to be reviewed as well, and especially with the mobile signs bylaw, that will come at a good time because we'll have a little bit of insight from the proposed district plan as well, which has some rules around signage in that as well. And you will have noted as well, there was 2 policies that were overdue. Just to note, they will be starting to begin the review process after the proposed district plan is notified, because that is an internal or internally driven policy, and so we have some capacity to do that after the proposed district plan is notified. So those are the key points. You will have seen the full review program. There's quite a few that will be coming up later in the future, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jeriel. Just one from me, just to clarify, there's no sort of statutory repercussions for internal policies which go beyond our set review date, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So with that, that's the footpath management policy and the street stalls policy as well. So both of those just have the internal deadlines that we've set that are now, that it's time to review those now. So no statutory fallback from that.
Perfect, thank you for clarifying that. Do we have any other questions on the bylaw review? I know this is something that council have asked for a couple of times, an update on where the list of bylaws are at. So good to see for our information. Thank you.
I just have a comment. One other bylaw that we might need to bring forward for review will be the freedom camping bylaw. As you know, the self-contained motor vehicles something bill became an act, and there's an implementation period for that, and so that will trigger possibly a bylaw review. We're still looking through about what the act implementation means for us.
Great. Thank you. If there's no more questions, Rachel, we'll move on to our next one.
Yeah, so lucky last is Heather Bosman for our climate action week.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Last and obviously most important. I'll start with probably the most exciting update for climate change, the new Climate Action Joint Committee. The first Joint Committee was held in May, and congratulations to Councillor Brown, who was elected Deputy Chair, which is pretty cool. There's 5 councils involved in that, so that I think that's a big deal for us. Couple of things that fell out of that. There is a lot of enthusiasm in that joint committee for a regional climate action plan, looking primarily at adaptation and how we do that collectively as a region, but also emissions reduction at that regional level. And the second big piece of work is a regional emission reduction plan off the back of the national emission reduction plan. They all have cool acronyms, like NERP and RERP. So we are most of the way through drafting the first regional emission reduction plan with a reduced scope, thanks to the cyclone. We had to put our sort of working group on hold. So the scope will cover transport, biodiversity, waste, and emission reduction and recovery, which is very topical and important to talk about up front. And there was a little bit of discussion at that joint committee about PSGE membership, and it now looks like PSGEs will all have a representative on the joint committee, making the joint committee effectively 50-50. So a good co-governance model there. So that's just really exciting, frankly, getting all 5 councils round the table on something that's a very difficult issue. And then we've got coastal hazards. That joint committee, the cyclone has created some delay. So originally we were looking to have the funding model work done and consulted on so that the strategy could come into effect on the 1st of July 2024 at the same time as the long-term plan, with the intention that the strategy be transferred to the regional council at that point and become their responsibility. But the regional council in particular just didn't have the capacity to proceed with that work, which they really had to lead, on top of all the cyclone fallout. So the new schedule, which was approved at the last joint committee meeting, is that the consultation on the funding model will go ahead immediately following the long-term plans coming into effect. So that will happen in sort of August, September 2024. And then with the intention of the strategy and the transfer happening a year later. So about 1 year of delay, which is pretty good in the circumstances, I think. And I believe there's a workshop tomorrow, an initial look at the funding model with the joint committee to start that work going. And then internally, we've got a bit of work happening in the emission reduction space. We are redoing our contract to make sure that we're getting what we need to track our carbon footprint and then to make improvements. And then that can feed into activity management plans, that sort of level of work as we come into the long-term plan. I went to a workshop yesterday about what Christchurch City Council are doing to embed climate change mitigation and adaptation into their long-term plan, and got some ideas from that about how we can start. We're probably one long-term plan behind them, but how we can start to embed into our long-term plan climate action. So that's pretty cool as well. Questions?
Great, thank you, Heather. Do I have any questions from councillors on the update?
Just a
Councillor
question.
Bogue.
We didn't put any money in a budget, did we, in the last long-term plan, apart from, your position? And I assume that we will be looking at putting money into the next long-term plan, particularly for the climate action.
So my understanding would be that, so we've got this regional climate action joint committee, and there's going to be commitments for us that fall out of that, both from a funding that going forward and also from mitigation actions at a regional level. And then I would expect also at a council level for it's because of the way that adaptation works, it's unlikely that there'll necessarily be like a big climate pool of money. It's more likely that there will be things that are needed across council that relate to climate adaptation. So, improving the resilience of our assets, things like that, that would be funding that attaches to those pieces of work rather than directly to climate change. But yes, is that?
Yeah, can I just add to that? I think what we're seeing here and what's helpful with Heather's update and Paulina's is you're seeing that climate is actually being embedded into all of our BAU and policy work. So to that degree, we're going to be able to, really get traction around climate through those core policy work programs that we're doing anyway. So future development strategy, the district plan, as well as the work and the direction that comes from the Climate Joint Committee, as well as the direction that comes from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council around emissions. So you're starting to see there's quite a cohesive work program that's sort of already and on our work program that we're doing, we're just bringing climate into the mainstream, if you like, which I think is the right way for it. And those projects themselves are funded in and of themselves, and so that's how we get the funding through to climate.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Crystal.
Just through the chair, just I guess for those that have read the Future for Local Government, one of the recommendations is that the government put money aside for climate change for councils. So be very interesting to see where that goes in that whole process. So that was very interesting to see. It was just kind of a comment.
Certainly a recommendation we would support.
Yes.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'll just open up for any general comments on the paper, various updates. There being none, I'll ask for a mover that we receive the key projects update report. Moved by Councillor Crystal, seconded by Councillor Tariha. Any comments?
This was really, really interesting and a great addition, I think, to our Future Napier committee. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you all, and keep up the good work.
Open up for any further comments. There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your updates. Now, councillors, I am just going to move our agenda items around. We have one short report at the end there, which I'll just move up if that's all right, with our presenters just giving a bit more time for your presentation at the end. So I will ask Christina Bunny, our team leader of resource consents, to come and present our resource consent activity report. Councillors, that's on page 27. Kia ora, Christina.
Kia ora everyone, nice to see you all. This morning we have our resource consent activity report. The purpose of this report is an update on recent resource consent activity that we have with us between generally covering the 20th of April to the 31st of May. In the last that 5 week period, we have seen a reduction in the resource consent applications submitted, as you'll see, by approximately 13%, with the mix remaining similar to the same period last year and previously, 60% land use consents and 40% subdivision. So a bit of consistency there. Our processing timeframes are sitting around the 20 days. We have had some that we have had to extend due to special circumstances previously, but that has reduced, so we're getting on top of things there. I have one application that I have included that I felt was of particular interest, and that is the Art Deco Trust project, the former Women's Rest building that you've heard about this morning. The application lodged with us was for earthquake strengthening and alterations to a Group 2 heritage item listed in our district plan. And these alterations were to enable the use of the building for a community facility on land that's zoned reserve. I guess an update I have to that is that consent for this, the resource consent was granted this week for that aspect of the proposal. Sounds like there's a bit more work to go, but the first step. And then I guess further to that, our summary table hasn't shifted a lot from the last one. I just wanted to touch on a couple, especially some that have been sitting there a while. 231 Puketitu Road is still under assessment. That's first stage of the mission development, so a bit of complexity there. So that's kind of just a reason why it takes a little bit longer sometimes. 88 Willowbank Road, that is still on hold awaiting further information. We're expecting that in August, just as an indicative time frame, but yeah, let's see what happens there. And another one is 38 Barden Avenue. I guess an update on what I've reported on is we had requested a peer review of the urban design response, and that peer review we received late yesterday, so that one now will continue in assessment, and 115 Carlisle Street's been sitting there a while too, but that is still awaiting further information. Yeah, I guess the other ones beneath still haven't moved, they're all under assessment also. Yeah, so any questions?
Thank you very much, Christina. One quick question from me. The Willowbank Ave application, was that further information requested prior to notification assessment?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. open up for any further questions from the committee. If there are none, I will ask for a mover to receive the report, being moved by Councillor Tariha, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Any discussion? There being none, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Christina, much appreciated. All right, and we will move back up to item 2, and I'd like to invite Bill Roberts, Bevan Trotman and Michael Bassett-Foss to join us. Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to skip that briefly, and I understand you have a presentation for us, so welcome.
Thank you through the chair. Tēnā koutou, kua tai mai nei ki tēnei hui, I tēnei ata ha ua. Welcome everyone on this rainy morning. Hei mihi miharo kia Coralie, our newest member. Welcome, tēnā koe. Hei mihi ki te komiti katoa. Not out of tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yes, so we're delighted to be joined. I'll reintroduce you to Michael Bassett-Foss, who's ably project managed the whole formation of the Economic Development Agency. And in addition to the thorough report that you have, we have a presentation where Michael can walk you through each of the various sort of issues. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity for questions and feedback. Over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Kia ora, Bill. Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, koutou. So, as Bill alluded to, I've been supporting the establishment.
Do you want to use the mic a bit closer, thanks?
Thank you.
Lovely.
I've been supporting the establishment of RIA for many months now. An apology from the chair of RIDA, Alistair McLeod. He is really sorry not to be here, but he's out of region currently. So this report is sort of out of respect for the funding agreement, which requires RIDA to report every 6 months to councils. I think I last reported, Bill and I reported towards the end of last year up at the War Memorial Centre. So this here is an update 1 year on. So I won't dwell on the slides too much, given that the paper, I'll take that paper as largely read. If I can get this machine to go. But I do want to dwell on a couple of themes. So councils took the bold decision to commit the funding and set up RIDA in late 21, and the project started to gather momentum in March, April. The partners being iwi, business and councils took the decision to do this process right and do it once after previous iterations of economic development agencies in the region. And give it the time that it's needed. The RIDA was backed underneath the co-governance framework quite rightly for the region under Matariki. Matariki endorsed the board in December. The board had their induction meeting in January, and in their second meeting, when they were about to launch into recruiting a chief executive, was a few days before the cyclone. So like all other organisations, they paused that and they focused on the task at hand, and that was to gather around every couple of days the organisations that were offering business support to ensure that there was some alignment, a joined-up understanding of the growing need across the region, and to start to formulate what the priorities were for recovery. RIDA continues to support the Regional Recovery Agency and leadership of the Economic Growth PO. It's been working alongside them to develop the chapter in the recovery plan that's going up to government at the end of this month. There's been 2 engagement hui with around 30 leaders. I think Bill and Bevan, you were there in the last one earlier this week, that reviewed the priorities and actions. And I'm just going to do a tangent slightly. This is the short-term objective for the economic growth PO, and it's a 6-month focus, so naturally it's to resume operations as much as possible. And just to give you a flavour for the priorities that line up in that chapter, The first one is around business support, naturally. The second one is around locality-based tailored solutions like Awatoto, Whirinaki, Wairoa that have their own particular needs. The third one is around employment, retention, shifting employment between sectors and so forth. The fourth one is about just getting an understanding of the constraints and opportunities around the region and in sub-regions. And the last one is around leveraging social procurement to ensure that the benefits of economic development are available to all in our community. And there's actions under each one of these priorities, achievable actions, and obviously you can assign organisations to these, and that'll be the way the recovery agency can guide progress. So through the discussions with the recovery agency and Matariki and the various leaders in, under Rita's wheelhouse, the board is landing on these as its priority focus areas. You can see the Matariki theme of benefits from the economy going to every whānau and every household coming through. Just to pluck out a couple, if there's ever a time you need a regional economic development agency, I suggest it's in a time of significant recovery like now. So well done, and in time to become the trusted voice, for the region on behalf of and with other agencies in the region, and a trusted person for central government to come to. I'll just talk about the intelligence and insights. Every council is using a different set of data, a different set of sort of economic agency, as these guys have elaborated. So when we're telling our regional story, it's based on different sets of data. So it's very hard to form a common story when you've got that different data sets. So the board did agree that it will move towards setting up sort of a more of a regional facility that gives availability for those that want to drill into their sub-regions, the ability to do that. And the other one is, especially right now when our key sectors are struggling, the board will focus on those key sectors rather than a lot of sort of business attraction and other activity that economic development agencies would normally do. There's the construct, it's in the paper. It's just for clarity, Matariki sets the strategic guidance around its expectations and accountability. Matariki signed off the letter of expectations, the Reader Charter, a couple of weeks ago. Councils have their control and influence through the funding agreement and associated KPIs, and you can see the partners there forming the shareholding for Reader. So Reader doesn't exist yet. We're sprinting towards a 1st of July establishment date or soon after. I sent emails this morning to the EAs of the chief executives of councils asking for shareholder details, which will go in the shareholder consent form, and likewise the directors. So, and then following that, I gave the heads up to the council CEs that have provided oversight for this process all the way through that we need to nail down the funding agreement. So Reader then has money and an organisation and can start to execute contracts and lead this properly. Just in terms of the funding agreement, I've plucked out some of the key parts. Reader was reporting weekly initially at the outset to CEs. It's drifted out to monthly at the moment. The 6 monthly reports you can see there, annual review of KPIs. The economic development leads and councils have been instrumental in guiding this process and providing some resource to it. And we had a good chat a couple of weeks ago about being one team. The power of many is way more than the number in the many. So working together, understanding each other's lanes, but sort of amplifying the benefits of all. Past iterations of economic development agencies haven't been very transparent about their financials. This is a small effort to do that after year one, but moving forward, that's what Reader should do. On the left-hand side is the funding that comes into Reader. On the right-hand side, HBRC is administering the funds at the moment on behalf of the 5 councils. That's their summary as of March, end of March, I think it was. and I've forecasted out to year-end land. I'm happy to take questions on any of that. There's a view of the KPIs. I wouldn't really call them KPIs. They're really high level. But the council CEs, Matariki and various stakeholders have agreed that we need to give READER time to set itself up. It hasn't got staff, so its first job is to set it itself up, so that's operationalised, and the second one is to form and those relationships. So around regular reporting, delivering on what it'll say it's going to do and so forth. And then provide that joined-up leadership for the region. So there's next steps. I won't rattle through those. Those are quite transactional. But aside from those transactional things listed there, READER does actually have a reasonable program of work that is spinning up. It started the development of a regional distribution network strategy. This is at the end of last year, signed off by Matariki and the council CEs. That is well through a consultation phase, and it's underpinning the infrastructure priorities in terms of the distribution network. So it's a really handy bit of work. And not surprisingly, State Highway 5, I think, comes up as priority number 1. Number 2 might be the road to Wairau, I think, closely followed by, the Highway South. So no surprises in all of that. Also aiming to do a similar bit of work around lifeline infrastructure. We can't have large sections of our region without power and communications for as long as we did. That's just totally wrong. And just acknowledge Napier in that too, that you've got an interest in that. So we'll align and try and amplify that work that's being done. I've talked about the Intelligence Hub. We've got a meeting tomorrow of about a dozen agencies, all with an interest in progressive procurement. I think there's a lot of activity happening. There's been a lot of talk, but there's sort of not a lot of visibility and not a lot of understanding between the agencies. So getting some alignment. And READER would like to stand in the space of setting up a monitoring framework so that we can get some visibility of progress, the direction of travel, and how the respective organisations are doing, setting targets. So I don't know what that looks like, and tomorrow's Hui will walk us a step towards that. They've got an interest in housing, and I mentioned working with the Regional Recovery Agency. So that's the slides, and welcome any discussion.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'll open for questions and comments. Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Michael, you mentioned data collection and the need for you to receive consistent data, not only from the councils, but from a range of agencies. Have READER, although it's very early, actually identified the types of data you're going to need so that we can get a commitment from CEOs and regional leaders of other organisations to actually deliver the data? Yeah.
It hasn't formed that yet. What I'll just drilling into that, there's 4 areas where I think that READER can stand in and add value. One is this portal into a common set of data, whether it be an Infometrics or a .loves data or whatever, that provides the same base level of data that the organisations, councils, others can use. The second is around a regional dashboard which would report on the regional, important activity. It would have automatic feeds that I understand you can do now, but they'd be pre-agreed, and it sort of relates to your question quite nicely. And it might be around employment numbers, or it might be around, housing, or whatever they are to be formed, and it needs to be done collaboratively. The third is around, the data is data, and I think having some sort of business analyst, economist function that goes alongside that, ground truths it, adds local insight, and to just help tell the story in a more meaningful way. And the fourth bit, which is really resonating with the board at the moment, is there's no one doing an economic impact assessment of the cyclone at the moment. There's various sectors that are doing it, but on the back of doing that, turning it into an opportunity, an investment opportunity proposal that can be used, by the region for the next decade and to help, shape inwards investment and local initiatives. So it'll probably do that in the first instance and then sort of start to progress those other ones. That hasn't answered your question, but... yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Gregg.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. Thanks for the report, Michael. Just one question about the business hub. Where is that going to be located? Is it actually a physical address or is it online or?
Yeah, it's in Hastings. It's at 101 Queen Street East. We had to be out of Ahuriri at the end of January. So with the support of the councils, went through quite a thorough search process for a new premises. There wasn't a lot around. There was really only came down to a very small handful, and they were all based in Hastings at the time. We didn't have the luxury of time to make that decision. We used the property group. They ran a multi-criteria analysis based on our high-level needs and came up with 101 Queen Street. 101 Queen Street actually sits in two tenancies. The business hub will comprise both tenancies. The tenants are in one of the tenancies, and we call that the back, even though it's out the side. So much like the Ahuriri one, it's got the, and those agencies and a little bit of fit out that was done was completed to allow them to move in by the end of January. So they're there now. The design for the fit out of the second tenancy, which will be all the meeting rooms, the reception area, the kitchen and the small conference room, have gone through building consent with Hastings, and that building consent has been issued. It's out with a construction company at the moment getting costed. I'm expecting that by the end of next week, and then we'll have a timeline around driving that forward. So I'm sort of hoping August, although this has slipped a month or more already for a number of reasons.
Thank you.
Comment from Bill and then Councillor Bogue.
Through the chair. Yeah, just to add to that, I obviously advocated hard for Napier, and it was a very fair process, and I'm comfortable that we reached the right decision, and we'll be backing it and using the hub from here as well. So that's my comment.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions, Michael. One concerning housing, the other on rail, restoring the regional rail links. Maybe I'll start with that one. Is that part of the kaupapa, restoring the regional rail links?
Yeah, they do sit as one of the 10 priorities identified in that distribution network infrastructure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other one, you mentioned a short-term focus on local housing. What could READER do? What would it look like?
It's had a number of discussions and it hasn't quite landed, to be honest. There's a lot of activity going there, but when you stand back and you look at this, we've got a good supply of timber. We've got local housing solutions. We've got an extreme shortage of housing. So a lot of the ingredients to do something. It's talked about getting a better handle on demand, where it is, and better managing the sort of the pipeline of throughput could be an area just by working with multiple people. The other one opportunity that came up recently is sort of related to progressive procurement, but in the housing space, and that is, if you look at housing, the constraints are affordable and consented land, and the second constraint is skills. The third constraint used to be, materials, products, but I think, like Jibboard, but that's eased up a bit now. So in terms of skills, EIT with Te Pukenga, we understood that some of the trades training, staff were either being let go or disappearing. So the board are going to lean in to try to grab those and relocate them, or just utilise their horsepower in order to train trade staff, so we can remove a constraint. So still formative, but I'm just sort of shaping a couple of ideas where READER might step in. READER's a tiny organisation and it's got very limited ability to influence, but it can advocate and glue dots. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Councillor Simpson, followed by Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Chair, just on the employment concept, will Rita look at the economic consequences of seasonal employment and the issues related to inconsistent income to low socioeconomic families?
Oh, we hadn't had that discussion, to be honest. The seasonal employment discussion comes up a lot about reutilising that labour force for areas where it's needed, and the obvious one at the moment is silt and immediate recovery. But moving forward, what programs can be developed to turn them into some sort of skilled labour for housing has been talked about, and not necessarily for new housing builds, but a lot of the refurb that needs doing out of the back of the cyclone. There are models where assessors go round and assess skills development on the job, as opposed to sort of sitting in a classroom. And you can imagine that in the recovery space, especially around some of the mid-eye type recovery efforts, where you've got people actually employed, doing the work, learning skills, and being ticked off.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, kia ora, and thank you for your presentation. I'm interested in paragraph 10 in your report, where it talks about the regional recovery, and that one of the areas that you'll be supporting is waste and sustainability. And sort of two questions running around my head. One is about, we've got a regional or a joint waste futures committee with Hastings. I'm wondering how it's envisaged that Rita might work with them, if at all. And then I didn't see too much about waste and sustainability post-recovery, so wondering if there's an idea around where Rita fits towards moving Hawke's Bay's economy to a more circular economy?
Yeah. There hasn't been a lot of discussion, but I will describe some of the themes. In relation to paragraph 10, those bullet points there were sent to government, to Kanoa, when it was established. The $200 million fund was established. It was signed off by the Matariki Governance Group with the priorities for the region, and so then Kanoa could actually use these to assess proposals for investment, and they still use it. We've had a bit of work done that looks at each of these priorities in the context of the cyclone, to understand their relevance, and where Rita plays a part in them. In terms of the waste and sustainability, if you take the notion of building back better, then building back better is a future region that is sustainable in its waste, and is green, and all of those buzzwords which I'm not very good at. So so there is a sort of an aspiration there. It hasn't formed. The other point I'll note is that prior to Rita being established, in fact, run under the Business Hawke's Bay, was a food sustainability program. It's continued to be funded by, in the interim, because it was doing some good work. And it's got sort of trusted relationships with food companies, and is sort of developing its model. There's been discussions about spinning that up into a regional sustainability plan or framework strategy, if you like. We know that the port, the airport, and other very large organisations have an interest in long-term sustainability. So, working with them and industry, sort of trying to shape up what a regional sustainability plan might look like. But it would be done in concert with the committee and so forth. But that's only discussion so far.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Councillor Tariha.
Just wondering if Rita's has or will take into consideration the impacts of climate change and what they will have on the economy, and propose policy changes and reforms and such.
Yeah, there's just a strong linkage with that in the previous sort of discussion. Our answer is yes. Rita won't do that by itself, and to be honest, there's not a planned piece of work in that regard. But I know of many of the delivery agencies which are actively driving towards, climate change adaptation. And, you take this council, for example, is doing a lot around carbon sequestration in trees and funding it, and, an aspiration off the back of the cyclone, which has sort of given us a real impact to what climate change can do to try and accelerate that.
All right, thank you. One quick question from me, Michael. You're working through obviously getting your funding agreements sorted. Question around the KPIs that obviously go along with that. Are you intending to get a standardised set of KPIs from councils, or are you expecting something different?
Yeah, I think in time the KPIs will need to get a lot more definitive and, be able to track progress on them. It'll need to work with councils through that partnership committee that's described in the slide and in the paper to form those KPIs. So it will work with councils collectively for that. I don't envisage Reader will have a specific set of KPIs with each council, albeit that it will work with the councils. And again, this is still forming. Needs to find a way of working with each of the councils and each of the local areas to understand where it can add value. And likewise how the local area can support Reader. So aside from just working closely with the economic development team, that hasn't been formulated yet. So this is the fourth council I've gone and presented to, and I'll just give you an insight into the others. In Wairoa, really energised discussion too. There's an open invite for Reader to sit on their recovery committee, for example, just to give a lot more presence there. A couple of the board members whakapapa, to the north, so that's given them a lot of comfort. In terms of Central Hawke's Bay, none of the board members whakapapa to Central Hawke's Bay, so that's been noted. So we talked about ensuring there's visibility of Reader, when the new CE comes on board, getting them down there. We talked about amplifying some of their priorities, which are around, available land, housing supply, a lot of productivity, and their need for roading infrastructure. So, if we can articulate alongside Central Hawke's Bay what their priorities are, and there'll be areas that we could actually step into. So we need to work through that with Napier. We're shouting as loud as we can for Awa Tautu and Lifeline's infrastructure, for example. So.
Yeah, great, thank you. Evan.
Thanks. Through the chair. One of the things to remember, I think, is with Reader, is that they're actually representing the region, and one of the things Michael alluded to, as they're starting to put this stuff together and as they're forming it, they've got to be really careful they don't get off on a tangent and into detail in the wrong place, because that's a trap they can fall into quite easily. Hence the conversation around collecting data that's actually relevant to everyone, rather than just going, at the moment, the councils use different data, and you can't compare it. But if we can get to the point where we go, a mission concert has an effect in Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa because of these things, and we noticed in Hastings this happened as well, then we're starting to get some meaningful data, and we can actually make a plan and go, what should we be doing across the region? And Reader's role, as I see it, is sitting at 50,000 feet and actually looking across the region and going, how can we do things? As soon as we start pulling them into detail and small projects, they're a small team, they're going to lose traction, and you'll end up with Michael coming back and going, well, we built a house this year and it impacts nothing. So again, it's looking at it and going, how can they work at a strategic level regionally? And if they work alongside, for example, CEDA over in the Manawatu, who are looking at transport links across this way anyway, if they combine together, it means they'll get a better outcome for a joint operation. And we were at one of the economic development conferences, and the ministers were saying, if you think regionally and think big, we can support those projects. Don't look at Auckland's transport and go, well, there's $1 billion or something going into there. You can do the same if you work together as regions. So just that word of caution is, you've got to think regionally. We can't just think, unfortunately, just Napier, just Hastings, just Wairoa. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Bevan. Councillor Crystal.
Just one of the things you mentioned, EIT briefly, and of course, labour market utilisation, long-term resilience. I'm sure all of us have grave concerns about what's happened at EIT and the downgrading and the loss of, some very skilled people. How can how can we help in that space, I guess? Do you see that? Because I think the training thing for our youth that loss is a huge thing for our region.
Yeah, the board have had the same discussion, and they didn't land on an answer, but they drilled into this trades training and the skills hub that's over in Irongate that's set up, and you can imagine adding horsepower with good trainers, good programs alongside that, and just sort of getting throughput is one way to do that. Well, actually, another discussion was on the back of the Great Wines Capital, and the wine activity that was going on there. How do you develop momentum back around that? So I haven't got the answer, but it's an active discussion.
I guess for me, it was just, is that part of how you see the agency? Because, obviously growing our youth and growing our skills here is a big thing, and it's kind of, I think it's really sad to see what's happened here from being a really amazing institute that was doing really well to, significant amount of job losses, and we might lose those skilled people out of the region. I think it's part of, certainly part of our economic development is EIT.
Yep.
Across the region, because it is. It's,
Only tertiary provider.
It is the only tertiary provider, and we lose that, we're just going to lose our youth.
Yep. The chair took it upon himself to actually go and have conversations to understand what was going on. I think that's a good basis. And getting an understanding of what their aspiration is too. I think we all think the same way. It's a vital part of our economy.
Councillor Bowe, just another question. What's Rita's relationship with central government, and which ministry do you interact with?
Yeah, like the civic leaders and others, the board is very well connected with the range of ministers, and so has interacted with them, especially since the cyclone. Just at their last meeting, we organised, we discussed a trip to Wellington, not only to talk to ministers, but to talk to senior leaders, and many of them are known to us, but firstly putting Rita on the map, developing those relationships, but just aligning the messages that we're all giving as agencies anyway, and the same messages as the Regional Recovery Agency. They're really cognizant that if you have yet another agency in Wellington sort of banging on about its set of priorities, and the messages differ from some of the other agencies, well, we just look like clowns. MB is a big one and the main one. MSD around skills, MPI around primary sector, Waka Kotahi I've met with around roading and infrastructure. There will be others. TPK are really important in that mix for a range of reasons.
Thank you, Michael. And I would note as well that there is a recommendation in that Future of Local Government for a new ministry as well, focused on local government. So I'm sure this space will continue to evolve, as we all need to be flexible as things change as well. So it's good to see you sort of touching base into lots of those different areas, which obviously have an impact across the region from a central government perspective as well. So good question. Thank you, Councillor Bogue. I think we've had a really good discussion through question time, but I will just ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive the report and, receive the 1 year update, and that we note there's a commitment for a 6-monthly update in the draft funding agreement as well. So we will see Michael and your team regularly as well when that funding agreement is finalised. So I have a mover in Councillor Tariha and a seconder in Councillor Simpson. Is there any further comments?
Just thank you for the 1 year update, and hopefully look forward to 6 monthly. And total call Councillor Crystal's comments too. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson.
Through Madam Chair, thank you for the update. We've got a strong board in Rita, and I think we have in those hands and the CEOs and other regional leaders strong champions to ensure our message gets clearly through to Wellington and our region develops as it needs to going forward. So thanks for your update.
Thank you. Ask for any other comments. If there's none, I will put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Michael, for your time this morning.
Ngā mihi nui.
Kia ora. With that, that was our final paper, so I'll ask everyone to stand for our closing karakia.
It's the right one this time.
It's also toru wha, kia tau, te rangamare, ke runga e ngā iwi katoa o Ahuriri. Kia piki te ora, te kaha me te māramatanga, e ngā wā katoa, te hei Māori ora. Thank you, everyone.
Kia ora.
Well done, members.